Tweyen is one of the new characters added to Granblue Fantasy Relink, and she is absolutely crazy. Not only is she capable of dealing tons of damage from a distance, but she is also capable of applying tons of debuffs to the enemy, which is going to allow you to melt pretty much any boss in the game. I think the developers did an amazing job at making this character, and so in today's video I will be breaking down exactly what Tweyen does, how to best utilize her kit, and how exactly should you build her. And so with that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero, and welcome back to another Granblue Fantasy Relink build guide video. I hope you are all as excited as I am for these characters, and without any further ado, let's get started. To unlock both Seofon and Tweyen, all you need to do is beat the extreme quest called Gulp, so these are the rumored monsters, or the proud difficulty quest called Lock Horns, where you fight off against a behemoth. By doing these two quests, you will obtain the Revenant Medallion as well as the Supreme Weapon Essence. You can then come over here to the Knick-Knack Shack. In here you will be able to convert 30 Revenant Medallions into Supreme Weapon Essence, and with 3 Supreme Weapon Essence you are able to trade in the special crewmate card for the character you want to unlock. And while it doesn't state in here anywhere, the developers did mention that you may get lucky and you might just receive the special recruit voucher outright as a rare drop. So let's take a look at Tweyen's base kit. Her basic attack is this combo string, where she shoots 3 different arrows with her bow, so that is 1 button press, 2 button presses and 3 button presses. And if you feel like, you can keep on spamming this and you will actually keep on repeating the combo infinitely. And as you can see, as you keep on doing this, you're going to be leveling up her gauge. But I'll talk about what this gauge does in a moment. Additionally, at any moment during your combo string, you are able to charge your attacks like so. And there's actually a specific reason why you're going to want to charge your attacks often, but I'll go over that in a moment as well. Just know that if you want to, you are able to charge all of your attacks like this. Now Tweyen's triangle attack or right click is the multi-lock hail. If you just press it, it's going to be this very simple straight arrow that doesn't do a lot of damage, but if you charge it you're able to lock onto the enemy and you get the indication of a certain number. And once you let go, you're going to fire exactly that many arrows. That same number is tied to the number that you see on Tweyen's gauge, which is called the Ultra Side level. And it indicates how many enemies you are able to lock onto with the multi-lock hail, and of course the higher the number, the more damage you're going to be able to deal. You're able to raise the level of your Ultra Side gauge by simply landing all kinds of attacks, including skills and of course link attacks as well, like so. The highest level for your Ultra Side gauge is 10, and once you go into multi-lock hail, you're going to be able to deal a lot of damage with this. And as you are going to see later on in the video, it is imperative that you max out your Ultra Side level to be able to receive a special buff that is going to exponentially increase Tweyen's damage output. And of course, much like any other character, Tweyen is also capable of doing aerial shots, and she also has a very cool launcher, like so. It doesn't seem like this is particularly good at raising her Ultra Side level, so at least as of right now I wouldn't really recommend you to do this, although it looks very cool. Now that being said, there is a really cool mechanic that Tweyen has, which is depending on where you are in her basic combo string, if you press the triangle button or the right click, you're going to get a different combo finisher. So if you do one basic attack and press the combo finisher button like so, you're going to be able to do this dash and you are able to decide on which direction you want to go. So if you tilt your analog stick forward, you're going to be essentially having a gap closer, and if you pull your analog stick backwards, that is essentially a dodge. And of course you can also use it sideways, but best of all you can also chain it together into a second dodge, like so. So this provides Tweyen with a ton of utility, allowing for her to always keep up with the aggression, always dealing damage to the enemies. It's very easy to pull this off very quickly to dodge an attack, or get out of an impending AoE attack. And because when you finish this dash you are essentially back to neutral state, you are able to follow up this dash with another dash like so. So that is already pretty fantastic, so what about the rest of the buttons? If you perform 2 basic attacks, you then go into this shotgun motion, where Tweyen aims her bow horizontally and is able to do this spread projectile. And as you can see, you can press the right click twice and you're able to follow it up with a second spread. This attack deals some really good damage, but sadly you need to be close up for all of the shots to land. Of course I'm not able to land these properly on Sub-Barrel because it is such a small enemy, but on a boss it's actually a lot easier to deal, and the damage output that you can get from this thing is actually ridiculous. And keep in mind that you are able to charge any of these attacks, but if you do so, you won't be able to do the follow-up, you will go into the multi-lock hail right after. And of course the same thing applies to the dash I showed you earlier. After firing a single shot, you're able to hold the button, and only when you let go will you performing that dash. And if you press it again, you're going to be getting the multi-lock hail, like so. And finally, when you perform 3 basic attacks, your combo finisher is going to be this powerful single target shot, and much like before, you're able to follow it up with a second one, like so. And again, you're able to charge the first shot, so I'm able to hold the combo finisher for as long as I want. And this one in particular is great for breaking monster parts, so if you want to focus the new boss's horns for example, this is going to be a great tool, which then deals a lot of damage, and you're able to follow it up with the multi-lock hail, like so. Sadly, you're not able to do 3 basic attacks into a combo finisher and then charge up your second combo finisher. That will put you back into the multi-lock hail. So the best way that I've found to level up the Ultra Side level is to actually do 3 basic attacks, like so, 1 charged attack, and then follow up with 1 tap of a heavy attack. So with the PlayStation controller it would be square, 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 hold triangle, and then press triangle again. And as you can see, by simply doing this very simple and easy combo, you're able to get 3 levels of your Ultra Side gauge and also deal plenty of damage. Now another very cool thing about Tweyen that you really want to pay attention to is her second support skill. Upon using the Skybound art, and let me go ahead and show you this beautiful animation, Tweyen is going to get a fantastic buff that is called the Bringer of Thunder. Just look at that sick animation. As you can see right here, I got that buff, and what this buff is going to do is increase the damage of her skills, and will also make her skills inflict paralysis. So if I were to use, let's say, Lethal Rain for example, I'm able to inflict paralysis just like that. And if you come over here into the masteries, you can see that you are able to further increase the effect of the Bring the Thunder passive, and this will increase not only the skills damage but also the skills damage cap by 25%, as well as the duration of the paralysis by 25%. This is absolutely fantastic, and it's another tool that Tweyen has available at her disposal that makes her that much more powerful and allows her to bring a lot more value to the team. Having gone over her basic core mechanics, let's now go over Tweyen's skills. And we're going to be starting off with one of the craziest skills in the entire game, that being Depravity, which as you can see you can hold down, and as you do this, Tweyen is going to keep on firing at the enemy, all the while applying several debuffs, those being attack down and defense down by 30% each, damage over time in the form of burn and poison, and finally a slow. These debuffs are applied in that exact order, but this is a fantastic skill, and as you're about to see, being able to apply all of these debuffs is going to be even more powerful for Tweyen because she has another tool that takes advantage of them, and that is none other than the skill Clincher, where Tweyen focuses and fires this powerful shot that is going to deal more damage with the amount of debuffs that the enemy has. Now, despite this skill being meant to deal more damage with the amount of debuffs that the enemy has, from my testing, whenever I use Clincher on an enemy with no debuffs, the damage of the shot ends up being 1.4 million damage. But then if I use Depravity and apply all of these debuffs on the enemy, like so, and then use the Clincher afterwards, I still end up doing the same amount of damage in a single shot. So if you have the right build, you can still hit the damage cap without needing to apply any debuffs. Much like before the previous patch, you were able to use Setsuna without charging and still hitting the damage cap, or using Energy Wave on Vayne without actually having any SPA to deal the most damage possible. So just keep that in mind, although it may make a difference against a target that is of a much higher level than you. Now the next skill is 2 Crown Strife, where Tweyen jumps up into the air and fires off this volley of arrows that deal plenty of damage, but more importantly extend the duration of any debuffs that are currently being applied. So I'm going to go ahead and use Depravity on Cerberald here, and apply all of these debuffs. Now the slow debuff is the one that usually starts to run out first, but if I go ahead and use 2 Crown Strife right before, it is going to extend the duration of the slow, and that is going to allow me to deal a lot more damage, have a much bigger window of opportunity on the boss to deal a lot more damage for the entire team. And of course the damage over time of the poison and the burn are going to keep ticking down, so that is pretty fantastic. Now I'm not quite sure if there is a perfect timing to this, if you should use 2 Crown Strife whenever a debuff is about to run out to refresh its duration, or if it quite simply doubles the duration of any debuff that is being applied. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and use the Skybound art to get the Bring the Thunder buff. And now I will be able to apply paralysis on Cerberald, so I'm gonna go ahead and use Depravity. Like so, apply all of these debuffs, he's gonna get paralysis at the end. And I'm gonna go ahead and use 2 Crown Strife, and that is going to extend the duration of the paralysis. And you can see just how long he is able to be paralyzed. That is an insanely long amount of time. I mean, I'm going to be keeping the footage running, this is absolutely nuts. Paralysis was already such a powerful crowd control tool in Granblue Fantasy Relink, and now that Tweyen is in the game, it's even more powerful. I mean, can you imagine having Tweyen on the same team as Eugen and Zeta? That would be absolutely nuts. It's something new that the developers are doing with these 2 new characters, as Seofon also has a skill that can only be used once per quest, but I like the idea of giving a skill that is essentially an ultimate ability, that is a single time use but is still very effective. Now the next skill on the list is going to be Lethal Rain, which is a very simple skill that you can aim and place anywhere you want, but of course you can always lock onto the enemy to more easily use it. And as you can see, whenever I let go, Zed is going to fire this wave of arrows that deals a pretty good amount of damage and is always going to result in you leveling up your gauge. And the cool thing about this skill is that it also has a very high stun power, so it's going to be perfect for triggering those link attacks or breaking a monster apart. Now the next skill is going to be Wheel of Death, where Tweyen spins around and fires off these barrage of arrows, and especially against large bosses this is going to do a lot of damage, but it's also pretty good at clearing ads. The amount of damage that this does may seem insignificant in the practice area, but against a large target, whenever you are actually hitting most of those shots, is going to result in a lot more damage. Now the next skill on the list is going to be Valiant Weave, where Zeta leaps into the air and fires 3 arrows while being able to dodge out of the way by tilting the analog stick. So it's very similar to her basic shot and combo finisher to dodge out of the way. By performing Valiant Weave, she fires off these arrows and then you select the direction that you want her to move in. Although in the case of the skill Valiant Weave, you can't actually make Tweyen move up, she is always going to dodge to the sides or backwards whenever performing this skill. But thankfully it does a pretty good amount of damage and it is a skill that is very easy to land. Now the next skill on the list is going to be a very simple buff by the name of Merculite, whereby performing this, Tweyen gets a 40% attack boost increase, but on top of that she also gets Mirror Image, which as you can see allows me to go up to Sir Barreled, and I'm able to sustain 3 different hits without actually taking any damage. Sadly, the game doesn't give you any visual indicator for whenever the mirror image does run out. You get a little bit of a clue, but you don't get any icon that pops up, so you do need to pay attention to your HUD to see if you still have the skill. And Tweyen's final skill is Peerless Eye, a self-buff that Tweyen is able to apply to herself that is going to grant her Stout Heart, allowing for her to become uninterruptible by enemy attacks, though keep in mind you will still take damage whenever doing this, but she also gets a unique buff that allows her to level up her scope gauge a lot quicker. So without Peerless Eye, I was able to max out my gauge and going up to level 10, by simply doing the basic combo attack string 17 times. But with the Peerless Eye buff, I was able to get it by only doing the same basic attack combo string 10 times. However, if you perform the combo that I mentioned before of doing 3 basic attacks into a charged attack and 1 heavy attack, you will be able to max out your gauge without the buff by performing this 3 times. But if you were to do the exact same combo but with the Peerless Eye buff, you will be able to max it out by actually only performing it twice. And as you will be able to see here, by the time I finish off that shot, I'm actually able to max it out without performing that final shot. So in theory, you could actually, in the second combo string, simply do this where you fire off the charged shot, and then you hold the button and fire off the multi-lock hail, like so. So you can use Peerless Eye to build up your gauge a lot quicker, and then you can go into the multi-lock hail at max stacks that will not only deal a ton of damage, but you'll also gain the unique buff that Tweyen gets whenever she does this. Also, something that I forgot to mention before is that you can actually cancel out of most of these skills. Like for example, if I were to go for Lethal Rain, I can simply block, or I'm able to dodge to cancel the skill. The same thing goes for Clincher, though for Clincher you can't actually block, you actually have to dodge. And a very important note about 2 Crown Strife is that you won't actually be able to use this skill at the very start of battle. There is a little bit of a wait time before you can actually use it, likely to avoid a scenario where a full party is capable of permanently paralyzing a boss before they actually get him down. And for the buff Peerless Eye that has this very long animation, you are actually able to cancel out of it. Although the timing is a little bit strict, you can't do it right away, you have to actually wait until you get the buffs, but you are still able to cancel out of it, which is going to give you a little bit more time to deal damage. Now, as for my preferred skill loadout on Tweyen, I personally like to always go with Peerless Eye because I do believe it leads to a pretty big jump in DPS by having the Ultra Sight level at max a lot quicker. Additionally, I like to always take Clincher with me, because it is essentially just a very powerful skill that deals a lot of damage, even if you have 0 debuffs on the enemy. That being said, I do like to take Depravity because it deals a pretty decent amount of damage and it has all of these debuffs. I just don't think that taking Depravity in some of the easier content, so that is anything that is not Lucilius, Bahamut, the Galanza and Maglial boss fight and the new Behemoth, I do believe that excluding all of those quests, Depravity is not going to be as powerful, because quite simply you can blitz through most fights in the game very quickly, and so you won't be taking a lot of advantage of all of these damage over times and debuffs, and I think it would be better for those boss fights if you had a slot that is dedicated to a more powerful damage focused skill like the Wheel of Death. And for the final slot, I initially thought that I was going to take to Crown Strive, because it deals a lot of damage and also has the effect of prolonging the duration of any debuffs that the enemy has, but I have now done a bunch of quests as Tweyen, and I was not able to use this skill a single time in any of those quests. This is because the skill already starts on cooldown whenever you enter a quest, because the developers are trying to not make it overpowered, but it really just ends up feeling like a waste of a slot because I end up finishing the quest without being able to use this. And so at which point I would much rather go with Lethal Rain, a very simple skill that is very easy to use, has a pretty short cooldown and also deals heavy stun damage, so that is going to help you with link attacks and building up your SBA gauge a lot quicker. Now that we have gone over the core mechanics as well as the skills, let's talk about the build and the sigils that I like to run on my Tweyen. But first, I do want to go over Tweyen's unique sigils, which she actually has 4 different ones. Starting off with the Dark Huntress Volley. This is the key buff that I was mentioning before. After executing a fully charged multi-lock hail at max Ultra Sight level, Tweyen is going to get a 10% damage buff for 30 seconds, as well as a 30% chance to trigger supplementary damage for 30 seconds. And this is quite simply a fantastic buff that you can get very easily with Tweyen, especially if you take the skill Peerless Eye. And given that the buff has a 30-second duration, if you play your cards right with Tweyen, and given that she is a ranged character, you can very easily have a permanent uptime on this buff, which is absolutely fantastic and is going to turn Tweyen into a damage machine. Now, her following signature sigil is going to be the Dark Huntress's Surge. This will boost the rate of fire of Tweyen's normal attacks by 10% and will boost her movement speed whenever she is shooting her bow by 15%. I personally don't find this to be very powerful, because for one, I don't think that simply spamming the normal attacks as Tweyen is going to result in you dealing a lot of damage, even if you were to have this additional 10% rate of fire. Additionally, the movement speed can actually come in handy, but given that Tweyen has so much mobility already built into her kit, without even taking into account some of her skills, and the fact that most of the arenas in this game are actually quite small, I really don't feel like this is going to make a big difference, and so I actually recommend you to pass up on this skill, especially considering that at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a very small room for any sigils that we would like to add to our build, and this one would just feel like a waste. Then there is the Dark Huntress's Warpath. This is going to allow Tweyen's charged attacks to charge faster, deal more damage, and have a higher stun power. Specifically 20% faster charge time, 20% more damage, and 30% more stun power. Additionally, each of these charged attacks will have a 20% chance to apply a random debuff, that being attack down, defense down, burn, or poison. Tweyen's core gameplay loop is going to involve doing a lot of charged attacks, so being able to charge them quicker is already pretty beneficial. On top of that, you get to deal more damage, have more stun power, and can also apply a debuff as a bonus. Sign me up, that is a fantastic deal that you can get with a single sigil. That being said, I can see the argument as to you actually being able to replace this with some offensive sigil that could result in you dealing more damage over the course of an entire quest, as for example with Combo Booster. If you have it active, you're able to get a 70% damage increase with a single sigil, which is certainly a lot higher than 20%. But still, I do believe that this is a very cool sigil, so I would still recommend you to pick it up. And finally, there is the 2 Crown Boundary Sigil, which is going to set your max HP to 45,000 and give you a 50% attack increase and raise your damage cap by 100%. Given that both Seofon and Tweyen do not have a terminus weapon, this is the game essentially giving you a way to get the same bonuses that you would get from the terminus weapon without actually having to make us grind Bahamut for even longer. And as you all know, raising your damage cap is the biggest deal when it comes to dealing more damage in this game, so this one becomes pretty much a mandatory sigil on Tweyen. Now before we cover the rest of the sigils and the overmasteries that I recommend, let's talk about the weapons. As you can see, Tweyen only has access to 2 different weapons, so you already get one of them from the start, and the second one is the Ascension weapon, and because there is no terminus weapon, it does give you sigil booster as well as damage cap. But as you can see, it also gives you 15 levels of supplementary damage, which is essentially a way for you to trigger an additional hit that is going to deal 20% of the original's damage. So if you can, and if you do have the patience to go for the Ascension weapon and max it out all the way, that is of course going to be very beneficial. And so now let me show you the build that I'm running on my Tweyen that I think makes her one of the most powerful characters in the game. Starting off with the weapon, I'm using a critical hit rate Right Stone that also has quick cooldown, just so that I am able to use my skills more often, and again it's going to allow me to use the buff Peerless Eye more often. Now the rest of the build gets a little bit interesting. As you can see, I'm running 3 different signature sigils, those being the Dark Huntress Volley, the 2 Crown Boundary, and the Dark Huntress's Warpath. So it's all the signature sigils apart from the one that gives you movement speed. I then am running 4 different sigils that you get from Lucilius. All of these sigils give you damage cap, and if you max them out, you're able to max out on damage cap, so if you don't already have any of these, do not worry, you can replace them with damage cap. The thing about the Lucilius sigils is that they end up being more efficient, because as you can see, the Alpha sigil is going to increase the damage cap of my normal attacks and charged attacks by 26%, the Beta is going to increase the damage cap of all of my skills by 36%, and Gamma, of which I have 2 different sigils, is going to increase my overall damage cap by an additional 30%. That on top of giving me a shield that is going to nullify up to 50,000 damage upon activating my Skybound art. So again, if you simply have damage cap sigils, you can run them as alternatives, but you can think of these as being the best in slot upgrades. I'm then running a War Elemental sigil, which is quite simply going to allow me to deal 20% more damage against all enemies in the game, so it is a very powerful buff that you can get from a single sigil if you are lucky enough to get it. Though I believe that the new quests have a higher drop rate of getting this, so I hope that you are all lucky. Next up, I have a Tyranny sigil with Aegis. So Tyranny is going to lower my max HP by 20%, but it's going to increase my base attack by 36%. And because I have Aegis, I'm still able to raise my maximum HP while still being below the 45,000 HP threshold to take advantage of this signature sigil that you would normally get from the Terminus weapon. But of course, if you don't mind having lower HP, you can always replace the Tyranny Aegis sigil with one that comes with improved dodge, nimble onslaught, or something even more offensive. And then there is my Stamina sigil that comes with Stamina and improved dodge. Stamina is going to raise my attack depending on how high my HP is, so if I'm at full health, I'm getting a 51% attack boost, and improved dodge, I've said this since the game released. I value this sigil a lot because it's going to extend my dodge count for up to 7, and it's also going to give me additional iframes on my dodge, so I really do value having that defensive option. I then also have a Combo Booster sigil that comes with quick cooldown. As I mentioned before, Combo Booster is going to give you a fantastic boost to your damage as long as you are able to keep on hitting the enemy and maintaining that buff. But given that Tweyen is a ranged character with all of that mobility, I do believe that it is very easy for you to keep Combo Booster active for a long time, and simply increasing your damage output by 70% is a fantastic thing. And then of course I'm running quick cooldown, which is going to give me additional skill cooldown, though you could replace this with a more defensive sigil like Potion Hoarder for example, or even Cascade if you prefer. And finally I have a supplementary damage 5 sigil. I know a lot of people still don't have one, but thankfully the new quests seem to have a higher drop chance to get them, and because the Ascension weapon already gives me supplementary damage, by only running a single supplementary damage sigil, I'm able to still have a 72% chance to trigger that supplementary damage, so I essentially have a 72% chance of dealing 20% more damage at all times, and honestly that is pretty fantastic. This one comes with improved healing, which is not going to do a lot for me, but it is the only supplementary damage 5 plus sigil that I have, so I'm not gonna complain about it. Tweyen is an absolutely phenomenal character. She is a lot of fun to play with, and I think that she also has a ton of damage potential. I do feel a bit bad though about that skill that I was not able to use, or the fact that I was able to hit the damage cap with clinch despite the enemy not having any debuff. But still, those are minor things, and if there is anything that I missed with this character, let me know in the comment section below and I'll be sure to include it in the pinned comment. And of course, I will be making a build guide video for Seofon as well, so if you guys are excited for that, please subscribe to the channel as it really does help out a lot. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting.